You're listening to Conflict Radio on the Conflict Radio Network. Greetings, and welcome to Conflict Radio. Today is March 18th, 2021, and today joining us is Jared Murphy, of course. He's going to be co-hosting with me today. Jared, how are you?
Doing great.
Oh, that's awesome, man. You sound really enthused. Got you up early this morning for an interview. So we do have Marshall Masters with us today as well. We're going to talk about Planet X. Marshall Masters is a former CNN Science Features news producer, freelance writer, television analyst, and the publisher of YOWUSA.com, YOWUSA.com. Since 1999, he has been researching Earth changes and Nibiru flyby-related topics, including sustainable survival communities, catastrophic crop circles, impact events, and future technologies. Like many others, Marshall sees a dark cloud coming. What makes him different is that he always sees a silver lining, a noble and inspiring Star Trek future. Marshall, how are you today?
I'm doing just fine. How are you?
Not too bad. Do you still believe in a noble and inspiring Star Trek future?
Absolutely.
Well, that's good to hear, man. That's pretty awesome because things are looking pretty grim. There's a lot going on in regards to Planet X. First off, I guess just for the new listeners and everything, we've got Nemesis out there flying in an orbit around the sun, and Nemesis and a couple... Nemesis has a few planets actually orbiting Nemesis as it's orbiting the sun. And what can you tell us about that? Is there any new news? What's going on?
Okay, well, for your newbies out there, we live in a binary star system. Actually, some would say it's a trinary, but we have evidence that it's a binary, and the smaller binary companion to Sol, our sun, is Nemesis. That was what the name that was given to it back when I was in high school. There was this whole thing of us living in a binary star system was the rage of the day when I was in high school back in the late 60s, and then all of a sudden the conversation just died. That was it. They shut it down. And this was really something that happened in 1983. That's when the topic was shut down because it was spotted by the IRAS telescope, and they've done a lot of imaging on it. They've been tracking it. We've been tracking it. When we started looking at this, for those that this is the topic of Planet X, and it's important to understand what Planet X is, what it means, the word itself. It's not planet number 10. Planet X is a term that was invented by Percival Lowell, the founder of the Lowell Observatory. And he dubbed the term in about 1905. What Percival Lowell was doing, the reason why he started his observatory in Flagstaff, Arizona, was to find Neptune's perturber. This was the big quest of the European astronomers. And what had happened was Uranus was the very first planet discovered with a telescope, and they observed it and saw it had a perturbation, a little zigzag. And they then used mathematics to deduce what the body was that was causing Uranus to have this perturbation. And literally, the mathematics were so precise that when the formula was given to the observatory in Berlin, they literally just swung the scope around, and within a few minutes, pow, they had Neptune. And then they started, so Neptune was the first planet discovered with mathematics. And then, after they discovered Neptune, they found Neptune, like Uranus, had a perturber, some big mass beyond the planet. Well, what they did was they began looking for what they called Neptune's perturber. And that was the reason why Lowell started the observatory in Flagstaff, was to pick up on that and to be the one to discover it. A few years, I think it was in 1915 or thereabouts, actually Percival Lowell did image uh, they imaged Pluto, but at the time he thought Pluto was not a planet, it was some other kind of object. However, Percival Lowell had an assistant, Clyde Tomlinson, who he continued Percival Lowell's work, and in 1930 discovered Pluto. And they thought at that point Pluto was Neptune's perturber, and that was it. Game over, we solved it. Well, that wasn't the case, because it was in the 80s when they discovered Charon, which is a moon of Pluto, and it proved that Pluto is actually rather puny. It's the whole planet is only about, I think, 60% the size of our moon. Okay, so Pluto's pretty small and nowhere has enough mass to be Neptune's perturber. And consequently, the search for Neptune's perturber kept going on, and Percival Lowell coined the term Planet X simply to mean a planet that exists and that we know it is there, not that we can see it, we cannot see it, but we can see its interactions with planets we do know and can observe. And so that's all it means. Planet X is an unobservable object that we know exists by virtue of its ability to interact with objects we can observe. That's what it means. Planet X it's had a lot of names. It's Planet X. In the Latin community, the Latino community, it's called Hercolibus, which was the original term given to this object by the Atlanteans. The ancient Egyptians and the Hebrews called it the Destroyer. The Celts called it the Frightener. The Chinese called it the Red Dragon. Others called it the Red Planet. So there are a lot of names, but a rose by any other name is still a rose. And that's the same thing. So it's coming. Now, people say, when am I going to see it? When am I going to see it? All right. Well, I've been posting since 2013. We've been tracking it. We first picked it up from a camera on Mount Turrialba in Costa Rica at about 10,000 feet. It was a very good webcam provided by the university. And Nibiru, which is the outermost object of the Nemesis system. Nemesis has its own planets, moons, and satellites. And the three primary large planets are Helion, Arbota, and Nibiru. Nibiru is the outermost. And that's the reason why it's referred to in the ancient literature as the planet of crossing. This was the one that was close enough to get to us. And but it also has several other objects. There's about 7 to 9 objects totally, and it's a mini constellation. Think of our solar system and then make a very, very small version of our solar system. And that's the Nemesis system with its own cloud of debris and objects and satellites. Right now, we're in a locking orbit with it. It's on the opposite side of the sun from us, and it moves on 2 axes. On its horizontal axis, it circles the sun approximately every 360 days, but it's also tilted 30 degrees to the ecliptic, so it's moving on a vertical axis. And that's the movement that is particularly of concern, because when it is in the southern skies, the ecliptic is, imagine you take the sun's equator, if you will, and just take a concentric ring from there and expanded outwards to the 12 constellations of the zodiac. That's the plane of the system. That's called the ecliptic. And so this is an important concept. You have the southern sky below the ecliptic, northern sky above. When Nemesis is in the southern skies, it's not a problem for us. And that's where it spends most all of its 3,600-year orbit. However, once it's above the ecliptic, it becomes our problem. And it crossed the ecliptic in approximately December, I think either July or September of 2020. And there was an image that was leaked to Planet X News, and he put it up. Some white hat, somebody it was a picture that shouldn't have been leaked, and it was. It was obviously an intentional leak. Somebody wanted it out there because not only does if you go to my website, and we're down for repairs right now, maintenance, we're upgrading, but I have an article titled Wormwood 2028, and so I show it in there and I explain it. It's approaching. Right now, Nemesis is above the ecliptic. It's behind the sun. We're merging with it. What I'm saying is 2028 is when it's going to cross the ecliptic on our side of the sun. And then that's when we're going to have a pole shift and a major loss of life on the planet. And that is a basic summary of Planet X. And I have a book, Surviving the Planet X Tribulation. And if you read that book, I wrote it to walk somebody through it that has to explain it to somebody else. And there's a tremendous number of illustrations in there that gives you an idea of it. Personally, I saw Nibiru naked eye observation September 9th, 2018.
All right. So,
And so for me, it's real. For everybody else, it's like UFOs. There's a lot of people that just simply aren't going to believe UFOs exist until an alien is eating their face.
all right, Jared, do you want to jump in? Do you have any questions on that?
Well, yeah, I'd like to start with, I write about Nibiru too, and I was just curious since, the guess is that it's on a 3,800 or 3,500 to 15,000 year.
3,600.
Yeah. What you said you saw it with your naked eye.
Yeah.
Okay. I would like to start there. Where, when and how and where?
It was Warden, Washington. I was with one of the supporters of my work. We were out actually studying geological formations in the central Washington state area. We were coming back and going through all the wheat fields in Warden, and I'm riding shotgun, and I'm basically vegging out. It's just nice. Somebody else is driving. I don't have to drive. I like that. And but next thing I know, she is just screaming, "I see it. I see it." Next thing I know, she sees a small side road, and she pulls onto that so fast, I thought we would go up on two wheels. Comes to a screeching halt, and I look out the window, and which was clean. I had just cleaned it earlier that day at a gas station, and I saw it. Jumped out. The sun was just touching the horizon. Nibiru was at about the 11:30 position, or the 12:30 position, excuse me. And I have been looking at Planet X observation videos for years and years. All right. Nobody's done more analysis on this than I have. Nobody. I mean, you go out and you see other people and they have websites, and what do? They show a picture and they say, "Hey, what do you think of that? Let me know in the comments." I think that's insulting to viewers. If you're going to put something up, you need to explain what it is that you're putting up. and let people go ahead and do that. But you have to be the one that stands up and says, all right, here it is based on what I'm seeing. So that's when I do it, I do a lot of analysis, gamma analysis, tests for Photoshop hoax, whether you're going to have other objects that are known in catalog that could be in the same area and mistaken for the object. I do a lot of analysis on all these. And this object I looked at it dead on, knew exactly what it was. And the other person with me, we didn't have enough time to get out our cameras to take a picture. But we both observed it, and I questioned her about what she saw, and I did it in a way that would allow me to test. So I said, well, where did you see it, at the 2 o'clock or at the 10 o'clock? And she said, no. She told me she saw exactly where I saw it. And then it passed. And the thing of it is that the difference between somebody like you looking at it and me looking at it is that you haven't done it before. So the first thing you're doing is you're busy saying to yourself, what is this? I've never seen this before. And so you're posing all of these questions, and then you're trying to find an explanation for what you're seeing. I'm an image analyst. I don't do that. When I see an image, I just start analyzing the image, pixel by pixel, line by line. I don't care about summaries. I don't care to explain it or rationalize it to anybody. You study it for what it is. And I did that, and there was no question that was it. I've spotted that object now several times in other reports at the same exact place that I saw it. The only difference is it's about twice as big as when I saw it then, back in 2018. So it's doubled in size. And this is coming. This system is coming. We track 2 different data sets in my science articles, fireballs and earthquakes of all magnitude. Fireballs is just on the uptick. It just has since December 21, 2012. The Mayans were absolutely right. The Mayans were right. Hollywood was dumbass and wrong. Hollywood wanted to sell bullshit. And so they had everybody convinced it was all going to happen in 2012. No, prophecy doesn't work that way. You always have a harbinger that is a benign sign that you are on the timeline of a catastrophic event so that you can prepare. And it's like in the Bible, 7 lean cows, 7 fat cows. All right? And so we had a pure, crystal clear harbinger because the ancients, and here's something that it's important with the number of years in the orbit, is that the 3,600 years originally came from Zecharia Sitchin. What Sitchin did, whether it was intentional or unintentional, was he created a real hard time for anybody following on his work to sort it out, because he was not specific as to the type of year. You're going to have a Gregorian calendar, which is, nothing ever falls the same day. I mean, we're always jumping around. It's really a crappy calendar. The lunar calendars, the very first calendar that was ever, these were the very first calendars ever. When these prophecies were all done, they didn't have a Gregorian calendar, they had a lunar calendar. And so a lunar calendar has different duration, and when you recalibrate everything from the Gregorian calendar to a lunar calendar, the numbers all fit. Clickety click, click, click. When you do it with Gregorian, they don't fit. All right? And it's like trying to put 7 cylinders into a 6-cylinder car. It just ain't going to work right. And so it's coming. It's on track. we keep observing it. I keep seeing observation videos. The thing about it is that a lot of the observations of Planet X stopped. And it wasn't because it was a hoax or Nancy Leader or any other nonsense. It's because COVID. People are locked down. They're in their homes. Who's outside and going around? All right. And that was the big thing. And then all the politics sucked the oxygen out of the room. So Planet X is kind of waffled out there, and it has nothing to do with the science and what's going on. The science and everything that we see just keeps saying, yeah, this damn rock's coming. Okay, that's it. And we just keep seeing it, but it's all of this other distraction and noise that's making it difficult for people to focus on what is really actually happening. And yeah, for me, I've seen it. Once that happened, it accelerated my motion. I had just finished writing Radio Free Earth because it's going to be important for people to know how to use two-way radios, because that's all that's really going to be left for distance communication. Short of that, you're going to have signal flares and, campfires or whatever. Two-way radios, after everything else is shut down, the internet, communications, that system folds up and it goes away. You're going to have people that are just doing ham radio. And so we wrote the book. And then at that point, I was going to take some time off. But after seeing it with my own eyes in 2018, I knew I had to move directly into the next project, which is Win-Win Survival Handbook. And for your listeners, you can find that at domecommunity.com. That's domecommunity.com. And that'll take you straight to the pages on Amazon. You can look at it. And this is about how do we survive what's coming. That is the key thing. And my focus right now is there's just no more time to waste on trying to prove to people who are in denial. All right. I've been doing that for, since 2002. All right. Now it's time to work with the people who are smart enough to understand what they're looking at and that they need to take action.
So you're saying,
and because a lot of people look and they say, "Oh my gosh, isn't that interesting?" I don't know. All right, and those three words just allows them to stop thinking, doing, being critical. And that's it. So I'm more interested right now in working with people who are not in denial. And 90% of these people have had dreams, visions, and premonitions about what's coming since childhood. So they don't come through the science, they come through the spiritual. 9 out of 10 people come through the spiritual side. The other 10% are what I call perceptives. These are people who are critical thinkers, and they can filter out their own prejudice and bias and programming to look at what is actually in front of them and to see it for what it is. And so now the Planet X is coming back. It's starting to slowly grow back. But like I said, all of the politics has pulled the oxygen out of the room. And
so you're saying it's on a 3,600-year orbit, right?
Lunar year orbit. Okay. Yes.
So how many years is that for us? Is it?
That's 3,600 lunar years for us. It's not that big a difference. I think maybe about 1,000 years difference between the two calendars. But in terms for us, I already wrote that in my article, Wormwood 2028. That's when I projected that it'll be on our side and it will cross the ecliptic. And after it crosses the ecliptic is when we're going to have a pole shift. And the planet is, and I agree with Ed Dames, I see the planet shifting about 12 degrees.
All right, Jared.
Yeah, so look, I may have missed this from your article, but do you set a direction based on if Nibiru is visible with the naked eye, we should be able to photograph it again. Has anyone done that? Do you have diagrams, or I may have missed anything that you have done already that has shown? We should be able to take them photographs of it then.
Well, I've been putting up articles for years of observations. The best observations are at altitude, people in passenger jets, because it's very clear sky up there. Okay. And
right, but if you have a direction
they
and
have
a
a good
location,
angle
I'm looking
on
for an
the
X that
horizon,
marks the spot.
and so it helps it. So I have put up, guys, I have I have put up numerous observation articles. I've done a lot of videos. These are actual, these are sightings, and I go through and I vet them, I analyze them, I put them up, I explain everything, and most people go, well, I don't know about that. All right, because they haven't seen it with their own eyes. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many. This is like UFOs. You could have a mountain of photographs, affidavits, testimony, all kinds of stuff, and people are still going to go, what? Oh, I don't know. All right.
Well, I think there's plenty of schools
and they're going to keep saying, I don't know, until an alien is eating their face.
Well, there's plenty.
That's the problem.
There's plenty of
it's
astronomical
not the science,
departments that can.
The problem is the denial.
Marshall, if you know where it is, I'm just curious, why has no astronomical department photographed it?
Well, they're not going to release that, Jared.
No, well, but if you've published on this so much and you know where it is in the night sky, I mean, we can get telescope time. We can photograph this if we know the direction and location in the sky.
It's behind the sun. It is on the other side of the sun.
But you've seen it twice.
That is the most difficult place to observe objects, and the only time you can observe them is very close to sunrise and close to sunset. And Chelyabinsk 2013, they didn't see that coming. It detonated with the equivalent force of 30 atomic bombs. And NASA finally had to admit they didn't see it because it came out of the sun. Now, there's suppression, all right? And, I mean, there's what, guys? Let's cut the crap here. There's about, 20, 30, 40 different keywords that if I say them, your video's going to be demonetized or removed. Yeah. And if I say enough of them, you're going to lose your channel, right?
Yeah.
Come on. Let's cut the crap. You have to deal with suppression. I've been dealing with suppression from the very get-go. All right? This topic has been under heavy suppression. And has NASA imaged it? Hell yeah. The image that is in the 2028 Planet X, my Wormwood 2028, that came out of one of our solar observatories. All right. And it was slipped out by a white hat, somebody that just, saw it and went, oh my God, this people need to understand this. But the suppression is there. At NASA, for every scientist on the payroll, you got 2 spooks. It's 2 spooks for every geek. Everything you see is filtered and filtered again and filtered again and sponged and sponged and sponged. And to sit there and say, well, why haven't they reported this, that, and it would be logical to assume is ignorance of the massive amount of suppression that has been going on in this topic, which is no different than the massive amount of suppression you guys have to deal with in getting your show on the air without YouTube busting your nuts. Yeah, I've been dealing with this for a long time. So excuse me if the argument just upsets me a little bit, but I'm tired of suppression. The suppression really went crazy in 2017. That's when the deep state went totally crazy about Planet X because it was Blood Moon Triad. We published on it. We said, well, that's an interesting idea, but it's not going to pan out to what everybody thinks. But in September of 2017, more people than in the history of the internet were researching the term Planet X and Nibiru, and all of them were Christians. And the minute the deep state saw that, holy crap, they fell on me and other Planet X researchers like a ton of bricks, demonetizing, canceling, attacking, you name it. I could go on and share with you all of the stuff that they have done. I just don't do it because people know it's suppression and they don't want to hear about it. But it's my life and I have to live with it.
All right. Well, let me ask you a question, Jared. We know that there's a lot of cataclysmic events that have happened in the past. Would you relate those cataclysmic events, Jared, to a Planet X flyby, like say every 5,000 years or so?
Again, like there's this issue with how much do we have been revealed as to whether or not we are in a binary system, which most habitable worlds that we've observed in the greater universe have a binary star system. So one, we haven't either photographed and or admitted to having a second star. And two, even if we're talking Nibiru, again, if it's observable, then we have to photograph it. And if it is within a cycle that is causing trouble, again, there has to be some evidence for it. So depending on what you want to consider.
Jared, would you do me a favor, Jared? Stop with the assumptions. Give me some facts and evidence, please, to support your position.
Literally asking for a direction in the night sky, Marshall,
I hear those all the
where
time.
to locate Nibiru. So that should be a simple one that you can publish. And if you have, then I apologize. If you haven't, then give us the X on the spot on the astrological map. Where do we look? We don't need to believe you, like you said. You're not pontificating. We want to know where it is. So show us where it is.
Either side of the sun.
On either side of the sun.
It's behind
12
the
o'clock,
sun.
1 o'clock,
It's going
3
to
o'clock?
depend. I already told you earlier. You're going to be looking for an object that's close to the sun at near to sunset or near to sunrise. And that's how you spot an object that's behind the sun. And I have published, I don't know how many videos and articles with those kinds of observations.
I've seen.
All right. Okay, great. So it's not about, it's just, I'm all for having a general conversation, but as far as the specifics go, Marshall, it's about, okay, I know individual astrologists, that they're people, the astronomical observation is not an impossible task on an independent scale. So it's a matter of knowing where it is in the sky and doing the photography and having the time, put the time into it. So that's as far as Michael asking the question, if it has a 3,600 year cycle, does it have an effect on the planet? Well, we do have some general geological evidences over the last, if we want to multiply that by 2, in the last 7,400 years, there's some evidences of various issues. We have small and other magnetic and frequency issues on the planet. There's solar flares. There's the Younger Dryas. There's whatever happened about 55, 60,000 years ago. There's the volcanic eruption that Brad Olson likes to reference from 76,000 years ago. I mean, we can go on with super volcanoes. There's a number of things, and whether or not those poles are from an extraterrestrial body, sure, that's an opinion. That's not a factual point. If we're talking facts, what we can say is, I'm all for going out and doing the field work, Marshall. That's something I want and do, and I don't want to just write on it. I also want to go out and do the work. So part of it is, if we make an observation like there's a hole to the center of the Earth and it's in Antarctica, we have to do everything within our means to locate it. If there's an alleged Grand Canyon Egyptian thing, which sounds like a bunch of bullshit, we need to go back and start looking at those caves. If somebody says Nibiru is on the horizon, then what's your plans to photograph it? That's one of my only questions to you, which is what are you doing to photograph it and proving it?
When you have an object that's close to the sun like that, it is your ability to see it is completely unpredictable because it depends on your elevation, your viewing sky, a whole number of different things. And so when people see it, it's because they're fortunate enough to have. And you wanted, you know,
I believe
you're
it's
questioning,
out there.
yeah, but I don't know. How do I answer it? Because you're questioning all my work, but you've never obviously looked at it.
I'm all for
Right.
I'm all for if you know where it is and you've seen it with your naked eye and more than once, then there is an observatory that we can use. There is a location that will work, and if you've seen it with your own eye, then we can certainly see it from a telescope. So let's do the work. I just am asking if you've done that work, and if you haven't, then I'm saying let's do it. That's all I'm suggesting. I'm not attacking anything. What I'd like to do is if through the naked eye and through multiple instances and multiple locations and on multiple occasions, different people at different points have seen this planet, then it is very much photographable. If the human eye can see it, so can a radio telescope. So where do you, in your opinion, suggest we do that?
Well, first off, Nemesis is a brown dwarf, and you're not going to see it naked eye until it's close. Otherwise, you can see it in infrared, which is how it was spotted in 1983. In terms of observing it, I broke the story on the South Pole Telescope in 2006. This telescope was installed at the Scott Edmondson Station, and it was the perfect telescope because it was in the deep infrared, the perfect thing for tracking this system. And there were disclosure videos, 2 of them that came out showing the system, and those people were shut down and pummeled, and it was really, there's suppression, there's cover-up. You're just go out and do it. It's next. Go see if you're gonna go down to Southeast Arizona. All right, Mount Graham. The Vatican put in the Lucifer telescope in a position where it's going to have the longest continuous viewing of the Planet X flyby as the system goes through our system. And they put it there. So you have a telescope in Antarctica that was used to track it in the southern skies. You have the Vatican puts in a telescope in Arizona to track it continuously through the flyby. So I tell you what, why don't you contact those observatories and see if they'll let you come down and do a search? Okay, and then get back to me. I'd be interested to see. Give them, go ahead, ring them up, give them a call, shout it out, and say, hey, can I come use your Lucifer telescope to look at Planet X? See how far you get. But you got to try. That's the whole part of the suppression. They have the control of the assets. And in terms of looking at the sun, you don't even need a telescope. Since 2013, been tracking observations of it, first from Turrialba in Costa Rica and other places. Most of the best ones are at altitude from people in passenger jets. Those things have been reported. I analyzed them, and I put all my analysis up on the internet. And I put it up on my channels, Yowbook and Yowza, and I quit posting on my YouTube channels because I was demonetized and I'm threatened with being taken down for doing absolutely nothing. And so, and this is since 2017. They didn't wait for Donald Trump to demonetize me. They demonetized me in 2017 after a whole lot of Christians were researching Planet X and Nibiru because of blood moon triad theory with Pastor Hagee. And there was a knee-jerk suppression and sponging. Now, are you saying, let me ask you this, Jared, are you saying that all scientists are completely honest and forthcoming about everything they know, and governments who fund them and special interests who fund them are completely forthcoming about everything, and that they would tell us about this absolutely and give us access to their resources? Are you saying that's the way it works?
Just so you know, I'm likely on the hit list for the Vatican. I'm a former Irish Catholic, and I don't even get onto my introduction before I go after the Vatican and the Catholic Church. So I'm on the same hit list, just so you know. I decided how bad is this going to be for me? So not only are they not, it's so interesting. I'm trying to get my head around to drill into the scientist side of it for a point you're bringing up on two folds. It's important. One is not only are they not honest and the hubris is insane, but I'm still the one thing that shocks me the most isn't just that most of science is based on Victorian ideas that were they were tabled 140 years ago, and yet in all technology and everywhere on Earth, the very technology we're on now is only because people are willing to build on old theories, old math, old science, and we've gotten to where we are now because we didn't hold on to the rotary telephone. And yet, when it comes to evolution and science and our past lost ancient advanced history, they're and all the intentional whitewashing of everything or deflection, despite all of the craziness of that, the thing that I cannot still get my head on, and maybe you have a better answer for me, is how is it that there are scientists that are so brilliant in their field, yet they are so hyper-focused on that one point that in every area of their life, they don't look up, they don't look left, they don't look right. They have like horse blinders, but on all four sides, and they only see the one thing they're working on, yet their peripheral vision would be helpful even for the one thing they're on, and yet they seem to be more blinded by their single entity pursuits, like the guy who invents a graphene conductor for spintronics and quantum computing. I mean, irrelevant to politics, it seems like that most scientists don't even need to be misled because they don't get off the one thing that they're looking at. I don't get it.
Well, the problem for scientists is they understand the threat. I mean, this was something that we followed in Planet X community. This was several years ago. There was a A7 intruder on a training mission through Europe in the Alps, and it was flying low, and its wing sliced the cable on a cable car, and the cable car crashed, killing some 20-odd people who were doing work at an observatory at the top of the hill where the cable car went to. Most of the 20 people on that were deep space astronomers. And they were working on this very thing. They were murdered. Okay. Scientists, they go out and they kill scientists. No problem. They know. It's about staying alive. It's about getting your funding. Look at who controls funding of science today. If you want to know why we're not getting the honest truth from our scientists, it's not that they don't want to do it. You know,
hang on a second, Marshall. Let's let me get Jared on to something else here. Now, Jared, you wrote about Planet X. You believe that there's a Nemesis star system out there, or no?
Well, it does. It seems to be established. I mean, there's enough science. There's been astrophysicists that have published on the pull. The gravitational pull seems to be correct, and the 3,600 to 15,000 year cycle seems to be the numbers, and it does seem to be out there in mainstream science. I'm just surprised that not one astronomer has wanted to photograph it, given that some of these astrophysicists have published on it. My next question was going to be to Marshall, is if he's asked anyone to photograph it on the sly.
I wouldn't ask an astronomer to do it, because if they photograph it and they get it, it's the end of they'll lose their funding. They could lose their lives. All right. I don't live in this kumbaya reality world of everything's wonderful and everything's normal. It ain't. It's an ugly world out there. I've seen too many people get killed because of this kind of work. The suppression is out there. And, what they can do, sure, they can do all kinds of things, and they don't have to. I mean, the Pioneer probes were out there to detect for the magnetic existence of Nemesis. And then as a result of that, they put out in 1983 the IRS infrared astronomy telescope. And when they did spot Nemesis, the first thing they did was put up a cover story, which the Italians and the Dutch, who were invested in that satellite, were really pissed off, because they said the cryogenic unit, because even in space, the camera has to be colder than space in order to work. And so they said the cryogenic freezing unit in the spacecraft had failed, so that they still had navigational control over it, but they couldn't do any imagery. Well, the Italians and the Dutch knew that was a lie, particularly the Italians, and they were really furious about it. And what really happened, that was told to me by a government whistleblower, was once they discovered it, it stood out like a sore thumb in infrared. You can't see it in visible light. And then they cooked up this story that they couldn't image anymore because the cryogenics had failed, which nothing of the sort had happened. But that was their cover story, and they kept imaging, and they knew it was nonsense. The Dutch and the Italians knew it was nonsense because they were tracking the navigation telemetry. And they could see that this thing was being kept in station keeping so it could follow an object of some sort. It was following something, and IRAS, until it just had exhausted all of its onboard navigation fuel, was tracking Nemesis because they wanted to try and establish an ephemeris so they could know where it's going to be and when it's going to be. All right. So that was NASA shutting that down, and they had all that information. And everyone else that was involved in that project published, and they were vocal, and they said, this is a cover up. This is a cover story. There's nothing wrong with that bird. Why aren't we getting the data? All right. And it was because NASA launched it, NASA controlled it, even though other people were putting in technology and money. So they were playing on other people's money and doing the work. And they were tracking it for as long as they possibly could until IRAS just simply had no more fuel, and then eventually just was tumbled out of control. And that was the end of that. All right. So you come forward, it's just, you see these circumstances time and time again. There was an astronomer with the Naval Observatory in Washington. He had a special telescope constructed to do a deep sky infrared survey to look specifically for it, because he had published a white paper on Planet X and had actually given an interview to Zecharia Sitchin. And after all of that, he died very suddenly. of a rapid onset cancer that's known to be used by intelligence agencies for targeted assassinations. And even his wife, was convinced that her husband was assassinated because they took the telescope down to an observatory that we owned in Australia. We gave it up. Well, he had that thing made and shipped to Australia. They did the sky survey as per his instructions. All of the films were then sent back to the United States. NASA intercepted that. All of the film, everything disappeared. Period. It disappeared. And then this astronomer suddenly dies. All right? That's how it works.
All right.
That's the cover up.
So let's get into what happens when this actually comes and we start having problems. Now you did mention pole shift earlier, and I wanted to ask Jared. Jared, what would the consequences be immediately if there was a sudden pole shift with the Earth? Like say the pole went to, Alabama, say.
Well, I mean, if it was immediate, that's not going to be good. I mean, if we look at the actual examples we have now, like Greenland and, Antarctica, they were not where they are currently. So the question's always, is it gradual or is it immediate? And if it was immediate, then there's examples of the theory that there's animals that were eating 1 minute and then basically flash frozen. So there's a possibility of something dramatic like that. If you're still on the surface and not getting splashed by a lot of instant water movement, you could just be instantly frozen, possibly. The oxygen, as you know it, it's not that it would disappear or be sucked from the Earth, but the rapid movement of the planet itself at kind of it's relative. I mean, it's moving incredibly fast now. We just don't experience it. But if it was to shift angles, like you're saying, I mean, you might be a popsicle if it's going to be instant, or again, it depends on whether or not it's winter. We just talked to Brad Olson about the Antarctic, and I think some of our listeners came in at, it was the record for Antarctica is 155 or so below zero. I think that was the number they gave us, right?
Yeah,
so,
something like that. 180, I think.
Yeah, so if you hit a temperature like that, you're not going to be walking very long. You're not going to, that's a few seconds to death. You're not going to be standing if that's the case. So it would be pretty dramatic and none of it good and all of it quite, it'd be just the luck of the draw if you were to make it. Unless you're a society that's been around and planning and we're in some of these multi-mile deep constructions that are underground that have been here for tens of thousands of years, and they've clearly planned over maybe millions of years. There's been societies that have been able to plan for these kind of catastrophes, or they were expected because they've lived through pole shifts. So the question's out as to whether or not it's instant or whether or not it's a more casual movement.
I mean, that's pretty dramatic, isn't it? Like a pole shift like that. I mean, are we talking like all the buildings falling down, like New York City skyscrapers coming down? I mean that sounds crazy, right?
Well, I think it's pretty terrifying to think of New York as mostly built on stilts and water. I mean, think about that. There are seismic metastructures are all over the Earth. There's a reason the polygonal constructions last. There's a reason that we have been studying seismic metastructures, which are from nano-sized particles canceling and muting waves and frequencies to larger structures to pylon positioning. All of it has to do with the science of seismic metastructures. We've been getting better and better at it. Frank Lloyd Wright, who changed architecture and the world of it 3 times, was made incredibly famous after his hotel stood in Tokyo after the entire city, after their big earthquake, wiped everything out but Frank Lloyd Wright's hotel. There are ways to construct things to withstand massive movements of the Earth's crust itself. Whether or not that would be similar, in effect, we're assuming that the plates would shift as opposed to the whole globe moving simultaneously, and those after effects and shocks, depending on current or the magnetic poles, if that includes a violent shifting of magma in some way, like shaking a snow globe made out of lava, I guess that would be a good way to look at it. Possible.
And there is evidence that this has happened before in the past, right?
Well, there's the flash frozen animals that are found, mastodons and things that appear to have been eating grass, and they appear to be frozen alive. And that's perplexing. If they were frozen alive, did they just forget while they were chewing some grass and booked it to 60 below zero and froze? Or were they standing on grassy fields and the next thing you knew, it was 150 plus below zero and they were pretty much dead? I mean, is that there's not a lot going on, or there was some weaponization and they were in that area, like instead of a nuclear bomb, something that could freeze the air instantly in an area. I'm sure there could be technology for that in a more ancient, advanced society.
So
But
that sounds pretty catastrophic if this were to happen to us today.
Yeah, tornadoes would be a wish.
Yeah. Marshall, you're thinking 2028 is when this is going to happen, right?
Yeah, I mean, based on what we're tracking over time, yeah, that's 2028 is about the time of the pole shift.
Wow. Do you think it's going to be? Do you think it's going to be like as dramatic, like it's going to happen gradually or just instantly?
Well, when it happens, I mean, instantly is what's instantly. Geological processes, that's an open conversation. What it's more a case of is that, and I explain this in my books, is the pole shift occurs because Nemesis is going to cross between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter. And that's the reason why we believe the asteroid belt is the fragments left over of Tiamat. And it's once it goes into the southern skies, all right, we're going to be on the same side of the sun as it, and that's the problem for us. So when it's going down, we're going to have this tidal gravitational force from Nemesis and all of its satellites that are going to be pulling on the Earth, and this is what's going to cause the pole shift. And so the planet and how it works out, and how you have an axial shift, a magnetic shift, and a crustal displacement shift. All right, so axials, like our North Pole is inclined 23.5 degrees to the ecliptic. If that changes, it'll change our seasons. So if it goes up, we're going to have two seasons, summer and winter. And if it goes further down, we're going to have our four seasons, but they're going to be very extreme. So extremely hot summers, extremely hot winters. So that's, let's hope we don't have an axial shift. Magnetic shift, North Pole becomes South Pole, South Pole becomes North Pole. We're already in the process of a magnetic pole shift because this was 10 years ago, and we started recording flips of polarity in sections of the South Atlantic. That's where it starts. But when the actual magnetic pole shift happens, there's deep time evidence in lava flows where it can happen within a matter of hours, magnetically. Physically, that'll be a different thing. We don't have any. All we can really do is guesstimate as to what happens, but it will be a time where anyone living on the surface is going to be ravaged. This is a time when you got to go to ground. You got to be under the earth to be safe. Is during this particular time, and that's the reason why. And that is the number one threat, is the pole shift. That'll be the single largest loss of life. And it'll be terrifying. A lot of people are going to actually die from fright. Because if we're going to go into pole shift, then what we could expect is rotation could actually stop and reverse, go in the other direction. And that as part of this shifting process. So for everyone that is on the planet at that time, every point of reference that you have in your tangible and real world is going to change. It's going to be like in some sort of 1930s funhouse with wavy mirrors and all kinds of nonsense. It'll be very, very frightening. And a lot of people, whatever is in your heart is going to be amplified. And if you are in a state of love, those feelings are going to be amplified tenfold. But if you're in a state of fear, they'll be amplified tenfold. So the difference will be is some people are going to, through this, have a very spiritual experience. And there will be a lot of major out-of-body, near-death experience, shared death experiences happening at this time. It'll be a true evolutionary event for the folks that handle it. And I'm not talking about people sitting in the pews and thumbing beads or incanting prayers, all right? I'm talking about being in a state of love, like a grandmother who gathers together a group of orphans and just pulls them somewhere into some shelter and sits down with them and says, okay, kids, let's sing Old MacDonald Had a Farm, while the whole world around them is going crazy. That is being in a state of love. And on the other, sitting there, oh my God, we're going to die. That's fear. Praying to God, save me, I'm in fear, save me. And the fear is going to kill you because, again, if you're in a state of fear because you're only thinking of yourself, you're not going to do well. If you're in a state of love and in service to others, you're going to do much better. You're going to get through it. So it is, the ancients call it winnowing, the great winnowing, and it literally separating the wheat from the chaff. And that's what's going to happen. That's the reason why we'll have a major population setback. And so for me, I've been working on, rather than trying to prove anything to anybody, to be honest, guys, as you can gather from our previous conversation, I'm just sick to death of it. If you don't get it by now, tough darts, farmer. Okay? That's it. Tough darts. You're clever, you're stupid, and you're going to die. All right? And for the people who are critical thinkers, and they can look, but 90% of your critical thinkers have had dreams, visions, and premonitions since they were children. Unmistakable, unforgettable, IMAX detail. They see the same things. They see rocks falling out of the sky, tsunamis, fires, all kinds of natural disasters. And they see it with such vivid detail that it's amazing. They report seeing, the Nemesis system. And I never forget one lady who told me about her vision that she had. She was in her early 70s, and she had this when she was a young girl, at 7 or 8 years old. But it was such a profound experience. When you have these awakening experiences, they don't go away like other dreams. You remember them. You keep remembering them, because that's the whole point of it, is to wake you up so that you will investigate, learn, and do what you can to help those that you can and help yourself. And so these are the people largely that are being prepared to get through it, the ones that are having these prophetic dreams and visions. Like I said, about 10% of them come at purely from a science standpoint. And for me, it's been both ways. I mean, I had prophetic visions of what happens, and they were very, very profound and very disturbing. They're always very disturbing. Nobody goes, "Oh, wow, whoa, that was really cool. I'd like to do that again." It's like, no way, nobody wants to do that again. But also, it was the science that brought it to me. You see, I didn't need to see Planet X to know that it's there. I feel sorry for people who do. I really do.
All right.
Because they don't understand the science. The whole science of Planet X is that you understand it by virtue of how it interacts with other bodies. And what happened was that we were waiting for the results of a solar probe that NASA had launched, Ulysses, I think, and it was in a polar orbit, not an equatorial orbit. And it was mapping magnetic interaction, and sure enough, boom, we could see that the sun is interacting with an interloper in its southern skies, that it's approximately at a 30-degree incline to the ecliptic. And that was it. I was working on that with the Dutch physicist at the time, and that was all. That was it. The sun's interacting. We know there's a perturber out there. We know it exists. Where and when we see it is where and when we see it, but we knew it existed the minute we saw that information that was released by NASA, which, by the way, was partial, because NASA always has a habit, just when the data starts to get interesting, the spacecrafts always have a problem. There's always a problem. Something goes boom in the night. And they have stupid explanations like, well, one guy was working in metrics and another guy working in standard. I mean, give me a break. Give me a break. I worked on satellite projects with Lockheed Martin, Yeah. I mean, that is so lame. But people who don't understand the science are going to accept that. And that's the truth of it.
All right, Marshall. Well, we're going to wrap up this section, I guess, of the show. Jared doesn't have much time, so we're going to wrap this up. And just so everybody knows, you can catch the after show of this in the members area. So be sure to look for and join us in the members area. Marshall, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you?
Yeah, my site is yowza.com, YOWUSA.com. Right now, we're doing a major system upgrade. So it could be another day or two before the site's working again. And we've been getting a lot of heavy attacks, so we've had to upgrade our security.
It's probably is it going to look a lot different too, or?
Pardon, but if you go to domecommunity.com, you will see my book, Win-Win Survival Handbook. And I wrote this book. If you're going to survive, you got to survive with others. There's strength in numbers, and it's based on creating a community of 100 to 150 people. In other words, a typical small church. All right? Yeah. And this is how you go out. I show you how to set it up. It's 4 parts in the book: how to set it up, how to build it out, how to feed yourself, and how to interact with others. Because there's one big difference between me and everybody else that talks about doing this. I don't care who the bunker builder is. There's all kinds of bunker builders all across the country. You go ask them this one question: what happens afterwards? And they're all going to do the same thing. They're just going to say, we don't know. My book is about what happens afterwards, because the subtitle is All Hazards, Safety, and Future Space Exploration. You got to have a reason to endure the misery that's going to come. And if we're going to get through this, and then we're going to go to the stars, because we realize that as long as we're on one little marble, we ain't going to make it. All right, then it's going to change people's perception, and it gives them hope. You got to have hope for the future. That's absolutely imperative. And so my whole book is not about, you know, building a bunker and huddling in concrete and eating crappy food. It's about having a beautiful, positive lifestyle that's all hazard survivable. So while everybody else is hitting walls, you just go over an occasional speed bump. But otherwise, you're rocking and rolling. And when it's all said and done, you have a plan for the future and where you're going. And it's that kind of hope that pulls people through. They live for their children. And there's nothing new about that. Think about everybody in your listening audience that your grandparents or great-grandparents came in the back of a steamer in steerage and how they felt when they saw the Statue of Liberty coming into New York. Okay, it's the same thing working. It's that same motive. And so that's where my emphasis is right now, is if you're out there and you say, you know, I got enough evidence. I don't need to haggle this anymore. It's time to get up and do something about it. Win-Win Survival Handbook is just the ticket for you. Check it out at domecommunity.com.
All right, awesome. And Jared, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you?
Yeah, you can come to notaliens.com. You can get a signed copy of my book or join the member area for exclusive interviews. I'm also on Rockfin, and I will be at America's Stonehenge with Michael here from Conflict, but I will be giving a 3-hour in-person lecture, and we will be touring America's Stonehenge. That'll be on Saturday, May 1st, and I will have tickets and info out on notaliens.com shortly.
All right, that's awesome. And remember, you can always find us on www.conflictradio.net. Be sure to find us on all of your normal podcast catchers, including Apple iTunes, Spreaker, and iHeart Podcasts, I guess. And be sure to check our after show out in the members section. It's bound to be pretty interesting. And look for part 2 coming out here pretty soon. We're going to talk about some things exclusively on the podcast that we're not going to post to this channel here on YouTube. So that'll do it for this part of the show. Batten down the hatches and be safe.